Have you ever wondered why brilliant doctors, successful lawyers, or tech-savvy engineers sometimes make terrible financial decisions? Why someone who can solve complex equations can't seem to save money? Or why intelligent people fall for get-rich-quick schemes they would normally see through in an instant? Before we begin, friends, please consider subscribing to this channel and liking the video. It will help me a lot. You might not think so, but it means the world to me. Welcome to the fascinating world where intelligence meets irrationality, where logic battles emotion, and where your brain's ancient wiring collides with modern financial challenges. Today, we're diving deep into financial psychology to uncover the hidden forces that make smart people do dumb things with money. This isn't about intelligence. It's about understanding the invisible psychological machinery running in the background of every financial decision you make. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why your brain sabotages your wealth, how emotions hijack rational thinking, and most importantly, how to outsmart your own mind to build lasting financial success. Financial psychology. Decoded: Why smart people make dumb money decisions. Chapter 1. The Intelligent Paradox. Let's start with a truth that might sting a little. Intelligence doesn't protect you from financial mistakes. In fact, sometimes it makes them worse. Meet Sarah, a brilliant neurosurgeon who can perform intricate brain surgery with steady hands and perfect precision. She saves lives daily, makes critical decisions under pressure, and earns a substantial six-figure income. Yet Sarah has almost nothing in savings. She drives a luxury car she can barely afford, lives in an apartment beyond her means, and carries credit card debt that keeps her awake at night. Or consider Michael, a software engineer who writes code for artificial intelligence systems. He understands complex algorithms and solves problems that would baffle most people. But he's lost thousands of dollars jumping from one cryptocurrency to another, chasing the next big thing, convinced each time that his analytical mind has cracked the code to instant wealth. These aren't isolated cases. They're everywhere. Highly educated professionals making rookie financial mistakes, successful entrepreneurs sabotaging their own wealth, brilliant minds unable to implement basic money management principles they intellectually understand perfectly well. The reason? Your brain wasn't designed for modern financial decisions. Think about it. For most of human history, our ancestors dealt with immediate, tangible problems. Finding food today, avoiding predators right now, sharing resources within a small tribe where everyone knew everyone else. Our brains evolved to handle these concrete, short-term challenges remarkably well. But modern finance? That's a completely different game. Compound interest working over decades, abstract investment, vehicles, digital money that exists only as numbers on screens, retirement planning 40 years into the future, stock markets responding to global events in milliseconds. Your ancient brain, still running software designed for the African savanna, has to navigate this alien landscape, and it struggles badly. This creates what psychologists call the intelligence paradox. Intelligence helps you understand financial concepts intellectually, but it doesn't automatically translate into good financial behavior. In fact, intelligence can sometimes work against you. How? Intelligent people are often better at constructing elaborate justifications for poor decisions. They can rationalize spending they can't afford with complex arguments about quality, investment value, or personal worth. They can convince themselves that the rules that apply to everyone else somehow don't apply to them. Smart people also tend to be more confident, and confidence, when misapplied to financial decisions, becomes dangerous overconfidence. They assume that because they're intelligent in one domain, they'll naturally be good at managing money. They underestimate how much they don't know and overestimate their ability to beat the market, time investments perfectly, or identify opportunities others miss. The intelligence paradox explains why financial success and academic achievement don't always correlate. Why some high school graduates build substantial wealth, while PhD holders struggle with basic budgeting. Intelligence is necessary, but not sufficient for financial success. What you need, beyond intelligence, is financial literacy combined with emotional self-awareness. You need to understand not just how money works, but how your mind works around money. You need to recognize the psychological traps waiting for you at every financial decision point. Think of your brain as having two systems constantly competing for control. System 1 is fast, emotional, and intuitive. It jumps to conclusions, trusts gut feelings, and prioritizes immediate rewards. System 2 is slow, analytical, and deliberate. It weighs evidence, considers consequences, and makes rational calculations. When it comes to money, you need System 2 in charge, but System 1 is stronger, faster, and always trying to take the wheel. It whispers seductive suggestions. It creates powerful emotional responses. It tricks you into feeling certain about uncertain things. The intelligent person recognizes this internal battle and develops strategies to keep System 2 in control when money is involved. They build external systems, automatic processes, and behavioral guardrails that protect them from their own impulses. Because here's the ultimate truth. You can't simply think your way to good financial decisions. You have to feel your way through the emotions, understand the biases, and engineer your environment to support rational choices even when emotions are screaming for something else. That's what financial psychology is really about. Not understanding money. Understanding yourself around money. Not mastering markets. Mastering your own mind in the presence of financial temptation, fear, greed, and uncertainty. The good news? Once you understand how your psychology influences your finances, you gain tremendous power. You stop being a victim of invisible forces you don't understand. You start seeing the patterns. You catch yourself mid-mistake. You build immunity to the psychological triggers that used to control you. That's what we're building together through this exploration. Not just knowledge, but practical wisdom. Not just understanding, but transformation. Not just awareness, but mastery over the psychological forces that have been running your financial life without your permission. Chapter 2. Loss, Aversion, and the Fear That Paralyzes. Let me tell you about a discovery that changed our understanding of how humans make decisions. In the late 1970s, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky conducted groundbreaking research that would eventually win Kahneman the Nobel Prize. What they discovered was both profound and disturbing. Humans don't evaluate gains and losses equally. Specifically, the pain of losing feels approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. Think about that for a moment. If someone gives you $100, you feel good. But if someone takes away $100, you feel terrible. Not just equally bad, but roughly twice as bad as the pleasure of receiving that money felt good. This isn't a personality flaw. It's not weakness. It's hardwired into your brain through millions of years of evolution. For our ancestors, missing out on food might mean hunger, but losing food they already had could mean death. The asymmetry made survival sense, but in modern financial life, this loss aversion becomes a wealth destroyer. Consider Jennifer, who bought shares in a tech company at $50 per share. The stock has now dropped to $30. Every rational analysis says she should sell, cut her losses, and invest the remaining money somewhere more promising. But she can't bring herself to do it. Why? Because selling would make the loss real. As long as she holds the stock, she can tell herself it's just a temporary setback, that it might recover, that she hasn't really lost anything yet. Selling means admitting defeat, accepting the loss, feeling that pain she's been avoiding. So Jennifer holds. The stock drops to $20. then 15, then 10. What started as a $20 loss per share becomes a $40 loss. Loss aversion, designed to protect her, has destroyed more of her wealth than the original mistake ever did. This pattern repeats everywhere in financial life. People hold losing investments far too long because selling feels like failure. They keep failing businesses running years past the point of salvaging them because closing down means accepting defeat. They stay in bad financial partnerships because ending them requires acknowledging a mistake. Loss aversion doesn't just make you hold losers too long, it makes you sell winners too early. Think about David, who bought cryptocurrency when it was undervalued. It's now doubled in value. He's up 100%. But instead of feeling confident, David feels anxious. What if it drops? What if he loses these gains? The thought of his current profits turning into losses tortures him. So he sells, takes his profit, feels relieved. The cryptocurrency continues rising. It quadruples, then increases tenfold. David's need to avoid the potential pain of losing his gains cost him massive additional wealth. This creates a devastating financial pattern. People cut their winners short and let their losers run long. Exactly the opposite of what successful investing requires. Loss aversion also explains why people make terrible decisions during market downturns. When stocks are falling, the pain feels unbearable. Losses pile up. Every day brings more red numbers. The emotional agony overwhelms rational thinking. So people sell everything at the bottom, locking in massive losses just to make the pain stop. Then, when the market recovers, as it always has, they're on the sidelines, having crystallized enormous losses and missing the subsequent gains. Historical data shows that some of the best investment returns come in the days and weeks immediately following major market crashes. But loss aversion keeps people out of the market at precisely the wrong time, nursing their wounds, too afraid to re-enter. The pain of loss doesn't just affect investment decisions. It influences everyday financial choices in subtle but powerful ways. People refuse to switch from expensive cable subscriptions to cheaper streaming services because canceling feels like losing something, even though they'd gain financial savings. They hold on to gym memberships they never use because canceling means admitting the loss of the dream of regular exercise. They keep bad financial advisors because firing them means acknowledging they chose poorly in the first place. They maintain underperforming insurance policies because changing feels risky, even when better options clearly exist. Loss aversion even affects how you think about money you've already spent. This creates what economists call the sunk cost fallacy. Imagine you bought a $200 ticket to a concert. The day arrives. You're sick, the weather is terrible, and you've lost interest in the performer. Going will be miserable, but you go anyway because you've already paid for the ticket. Not going means that money is wasted, and wasting money feels like a loss. But here's the truth. That money is already gone whether you go or not. The rational decision is to stay home and avoid being miserable. But loss aversion makes you conflate the past loss of the ticket price with the present decision about your evening, leading to a bad choice, compounding the original one. This pattern appears everywhere. People sit through terrible movies because they paid for tickets. They force themselves to finish meals at restaurants uncomfortably full because wasting food feels wrong. They keep reading books they're not enjoying because abandoning them means those hours were wasted. Businesses fall into the same trap on a larger scale. Companies pour millions into failing projects because they've already invested so much. Cutting losses means admitting all that previous investment was a mistake. So they throw good money after bad, sometimes bankrupting themselves, rather than accepting a loss. Understanding loss aversion means recognizing that your brain's pain avoidance system will often steer you wrong financially. The key is developing strategies to outsmart this bias. First, reframe losses as learning experiences and data points rather than failures. Every financial mistake teaches you something valuable if you're willing to learn instead of avoid. Second, make decisions based on future potential, not past investments. Ask yourself, if I didn't already own this investment, would I buy it today at this price? If the answer is no, sell it. The past is gone. Only the future matters. Third, set up automatic triggers that remove emotion from loss-cutting decisions. Decide in advance when you'll sell losing investments. When the trigger hits, execute automatically without thinking. Fourth, remember that avoiding small losses often creates bigger losses later. Sometimes the best financial decision is accepting a painful loss now to prevent catastrophic loss later. Fifth, practice experiencing small losses regularly to build emotional tolerance. Don't let fear of small losses prevent you from taking calculated risks that could generate significant gains. The people who build substantial wealth aren't the ones who never lose money. They're the ones who manage losses effectively, cutting them quickly when necessary, and not letting loss aversion trap them in deteriorating positions. They've learned to feel the pain of loss without letting it control their decisions. They acknowledge the emotion, then act rationally anyway. They've trained themselves to override the ancient programming that served our ancestors but sabotages modern financial success. Because in the end, loss aversion is just information about how your brain works. It's not destiny. Once you see it operating, you can choose to respond differently. You can feel the fear and make the wise choice anyway. You can experience the pain of loss without letting it compound into even greater losses. That's the beginning of financial maturity, recognizing that emotions are messengers, not masters. They provide valuable data about your psychological state, but they shouldn't dictate your financial decisions. Learning to override loss aversion is learning to put your rational mind back in control of your financial future. Chapter 3. The Sunk Cost Trap. Imagine you're at a buffet restaurant. You've paid $30 for the all-you-can-eat experience. You're already uncomfortably full, but there's still food on your plate. You keep eating, even though it's making you feel worse with every bite. Why? Because you paid for it. Wasting that food feels like wasting your $30. Your brain screams that you need to get your money's worth. This is the sunk cost fallacy in action, and it's costing you more than stomach discomfort. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in something because you've already invested so much, even when continuing makes no logical sense. It's throwing good money after bad. It's letting past decisions dictate future actions when they shouldn't. The insidious thing about sunk costs is that they feel relevant. They feel like they should matter. Your brain tells you that all that time, money, or effort you've already invested can't be wasted. But here's the brutal truth. It's already wasted if you made a bad decision. Continuing won't unwaste it. It will just waste more. Consider Tom, who started an online business. He invested $20,000 in inventory, website development, and marketing. 6 months in, it's clear the business isn't working. He's getting minimal sales. Market research shows the niche is oversaturated. Every expert he consults tells him to cut his losses and move on. But Tom can't. That $20,000 haunts him. He tells himself he just needs to invest a bit more in marketing. Maybe hire a consultant. Redesign the website. He pours in another $5,000, then another $10,000. The business still fails, but now he's lost $35,000 instead of $20,000. The original $20,000 was a sunk cost the moment he realized the business wasn't viable. Continuing to invest didn't recover it. It just created larger losses. This pattern appears in relationships, careers, education, investments, and every area of life where commitment meets reality. People stay in terrible relationships because they've already invested years. They continue pursuing degrees they hate because they've already completed 2 years. They keep renovating houses that will never be worth the investment because they've already spent so much. The sunk cost fallacy is particularly powerful in business and investing. Companies continue developing products that clearly won't succeed because they've already invested millions in development. Investors hold failing investments because they've been holding them for years. And selling now means all that time was wasted. But time, money, and effort already spent are gone forever. The only question that matters is, what's the best decision moving forward from this moment, based on future potential, regardless of what happened before? Here's where it gets psychologically interesting. The sunk cost fallacy combines with other biases to become even more powerful. It pairs with loss aversion, making the thought of wasting previous investments feel doubly painful. It connects with what psychologists call the endowment effect, where we overvalue things simply because we own them. It feeds into confirmation bias, where we seek information supporting our original decision to avoid admitting we were wrong. Together, these create a psychological trap that's incredibly difficult to escape. Maya started law school because her parents wanted her to be a lawyer. 2 years in, she realized she hated it. The work didn't interest her. The career path looked miserable. Everything in her screamed to quit. But she'd already invested 2 years and $40,000 in student loans. Quitting would mean those 2 years were wasted. That money was wasted. Her parents would be disappointed. She'd have to admit she made a mistake. So Maya stayed, finished law school, passed the bar, spent 5 miserable years as a lawyer before finally having a breakdown and switching careers. Those 7 years, from the moment she realized she hated law school until the moment she finally quit, were all wasted because she couldn't walk away from the sunk cost of the first 2 years. The tragedy is that the 2 years were already gone. Staying added 5 more wasted years. The sunk cost fallacy didn't recover what was lost. It multiplied the loss. Businesses fall into this trap on massive scales. Consider the Concorde supersonic jet, which gave the sunk cost fallacy its nickname, the Concorde fallacy. The British and French governments continued funding the clearly unprofitable project for decades because they'd already invested so much. They poured billions into a venture that never made economic sense, unable to accept that the previous billions were simply gone. Understanding the sunk cost fallacy requires shifting how you think about past investments. Think of them not as investments still in play, but as tuition paid to learn what doesn't work. The question is never, how do I justify or recover this past expense? The question is always, what's the smartest move forward from here? Here's a powerful mental exercise to overcome the sunk cost fallacy. Imagine you're advising a friend facing the exact same situation, but they haven't made any past investments yet. What would you tell them to do? Almost always, the answer becomes clear when you remove your own past investments from the equation. Another strategy. Imagine you suddenly inherited this situation from someone else. You didn't make the original decision. You didn't spend the time or money. Given where things stand right now, what would you do? This mental distance often reveals the obvious right choice that sunk costs obscured. The most successful investors and entrepreneurs have learned to kill their darlings. They've developed the ability to look at failing projects, investments, or ventures and make cold, rational decisions about whether to continue, regardless of how much they've already invested. They ask themselves, if I came across this opportunity fresh today with no history, would I invest in it? If the answer is no, they get out, even if they've been involved for years and invested heavily. This doesn't mean quitting whenever things get difficult. It means honestly assessing whether continuing represents a smart use of future resources, separate from past commitments. Warren Buffett, one of history's most successful investors, says his investment strategy can be summarized as cutting losses quickly and letting winners run. That's the exact opposite of what the sunk cost fallacy and loss aversion together make people do naturally. Breaking free from the sunk cost fallacy also requires recognizing that quitting is not failure. Quitting something that isn't working is intelligence. Perseverance is only a virtue when you're persevering in the right direction. Persevering in the wrong direction is just stubbornness disguised as determination. Think about it this way. Every moment you spend on a failing project is time you're not spending on a potentially successful one. Every dollar you invest in a losing venture is a dollar you can't invest in a winning one. Opportunity costs are real costs, even though they're invisible. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you locked in the past when the only place you can actually influence is the future. It makes you optimize for not feeling regret about past decisions, rather than optimizing for future success. Here's the liberating truth. You're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to admit a previous decision was wrong. You're allowed to cut your losses and move on. None of that means you failed. It means you learned, adapted, and chose to be smarter going forward. The most expensive words in finance are often, "I've come too far to quit now," because they were usually spoken right before someone doubles down on a losing proposition, turning a manageable loss into a catastrophic one. To overcome the sunk cost fallacy, start practicing with small decisions. Notice when you're finishing a mediocre meal just because you paid for it. Catch yourself sitting through a boring movie because you bought the ticket. Recognize when you're reading a book you don't enjoy just to finish it. Each time you notice this pattern, make the rational choice instead. Walk away. Stop eating. Leave the movie. Close the book. Practice accepting that the past investment is gone and making the best choice for your present and future self. As you build this muscle with small decisions, you'll find it easier to apply the same logic to larger financial choices. You'll develop the emotional strength to cut losses when cutting them is wise, regardless of how much you've already invested. Because the ultimate lesson of the sunk cost fallacy is this: the most valuable resource you have isn't the time or money you've already spent. It's the time and money you'll spend going forward. Don't let the ghost of past mistakes haunt your future decisions. Learn from them. Then, make the next choice based on reality, not regret. Chapter 4. Mental Accounting and the Money in Your Head. Here's a question that will reveal something fascinating about how your mind works with money. You receive a $1,000 tax refund. How do you feel about spending it on a vacation versus spending $1,000 from your regular savings on the same vacation? If you're like most people, the tax refund money feels easier to spend, even though both situations involve spending exactly $1,000 you own. Welcome to the strange world of mental accounting. Mental accounting is how your brain divides money into different psychological categories, then treats each category by completely different rules. It's why found money feels different from earned money, why a bonus feels more spendable than your salary, why money in your checking account feels more available than money in your retirement account, even though it's all your money. Rationally, money is fungible. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar, regardless of where it came from or where it sits. Psychologically, that's not even close to true. Consider Rachel, a meticulous budgeter. She has carefully allocated every dollar of her monthly income. Rent goes here, groceries here, savings here, entertainment there. She sticks to her budget religiously and feels great about her discipline. Then Rachel gets a $500 bonus at work. Does she add it proportionally to all her existing categories? Does she save the full amount since she's already budgeted for everything she needs? No. Rachel treats it as extra money separate from her normal budget. She splurges on things she would never buy with her regular salary. New clothes she doesn't need, an expensive dinner, gadgets she's been wanting but didn't budget for. Her mental accounting has created two categories: regular money that must be carefully budgeted and bonus money that can be spent more freely. But it's all her money. The categories exist only in her mind. This mental accounting affects countless financial decisions in invisible ways. People spend cash more carefully than credit. Why? Because handing over physical bills creates a psychological pain that swiping a card doesn't. The money feels more real, more connected to you when you physically transfer it. Credit card spending exists in a different mental account, one that feels less immediate and less painful. Studies show people spend up to 100% more when using credit cards instead of cash for the exact same purchases. The payment method changes the mental account, which changes the spending behavior, even though the money being spent is the same. Mental accounting also explains why people simultaneously save money in low-interest savings accounts while carrying high-interest credit card debt. Rationally, they should use the savings to pay off the debt and save the interest charges. But the savings account exists in the emergency fund mental account. The credit card debt exists in the revolving debt mental account. These are separate categories in their mind. Using one to pay the other feels wrong, even though it's mathematically obvious. This compartmentalization appears everywhere. People have mortgage payments, car payments, and student loans, all with different interest rates. They pay the minimums on everything, rather than focusing extra payments on the highest interest debt first, because each debt exists in its own mental account with its own payment rules. Mental accounting creates bizarre situations where people celebrate getting a $2,000 tax refund while simultaneously building credit card debt. The refund is found money to be enjoyed. The debt is separate, in another mental account, not connected to the windfall they just received. The truth? A tax refund means you gave the government an interest-free loan for the entire year. You could have had that money in every paycheck, earning interest or paying down debt. But mental accounting makes you feel like you won a prize when you finally get your own money back. Richard Thaler, the economist who identified and studied mental accounting extensively, tells a famous story about a couple who saved for years in a vacation fund. They refused to touch this money for anything else, even though they had high-interest credit card debt. The vacation fund was sacred. Different mental account, duh. When vacation time came, they spent the entire fund on an expensive trip, then charged all their daily expenses during the vacation on their credit cards. They came home to even higher debt, but they'd successfully protected their vacation fund. Mental accounting makes no rational sense, but it's incredibly powerful psychologically. Here's another manifestation: the house money effect. People who win money gambling are much more likely to make risky bets with their winnings than with the money they brought to the casino. Why? The winnings exist in a different mental account, the house money account, where losses don't hurt as much. Investors do this too. Profits from one investment feel like play money, so they invest it more recklessly than they would invest their salary. They've mentally separated their original capital from their gains, treating them as different types of money subject to different risk rules. The reverse is also true. People who've lost money often become more risk-seeking to try to get back to even. They've created a mental account of the loss, and they can't close that account until they've recovered the money, so they make increasingly desperate bets to break even. This explains why people who are down at the casino often make bigger, riskier bets. Why investors who've taken losses sometimes double down on poorer investments. They're not trying to make money. They're trying to close a mental account that's showing a loss. Mental accounting also affects how you value money based on its intended use. Money designated for bills feels more precious than money designated for entertainment. Money labeled for children's education feels untouchable compared to money for personal spending. These mental categories can be useful for budgeting and goal setting, but they can also create inefficiencies where you're not making globally optimal financial decisions. James has $10,000 in a savings account, earning 0.5% interest. He also has $8,000 in credit card debt, charging 18% interest. Common sense says pay off the credit card with the savings and save yourself the 17.5% difference in interest rates. But James can't do it. The savings are in his security mental account. Depleting them feels dangerous. The credit card debt is in his necessary evil mental account. They don't interact. His mental accounting is costing him over $1,000 per year in unnecessary interest, but the psychological separation feels right to him. Understanding mental accounting helps you see how your mind is playing tricks on you, creating artificial categories and rules that don't serve your actual financial interests. The key to overcoming mental accounting is recognizing that all your money is just money. The labels you put on it, the accounts you create in your mind, they're all psychological constructions. Useful sometimes, but not sacred rules that must never be violated. Start by looking at your complete financial picture holistically. Don't just look at your checking account when deciding if you can afford something. Look at your total assets, your total debts, your overall financial position. This prevents the mental accounting trick where one account looks flush while ignoring debts in another account. Second, understand that the source of money shouldn't change how wisely you spend it. A dollar from a bonus requires the same careful consideration as a dollar from your salary. Both affect your total wealth identically. Third, question your mental categories regularly. Are they serving you, or are you serving them? Is your resistance to moving money from savings to pay off debt actually protecting you, or is it just mental accounting creating unnecessary expense? Fourth, be especially careful about windfall money, bonuses, refunds, or gifts. These tend to trigger the most irrational mental accounting, leading people to spend money they would never spend if it came from their regular income. The most financially successful people have learned to treat all money the same. They make decisions based on optimal allocation of total resources, not based on which mental account the money happens to occupy at the moment. They understand that the categories in their mind are tools they created, not laws they must follow. They're willing to violate their own mental accounting rules when doing so clearly improves their overall financial position. Because in the end, financial success isn't about following rigid rules or maintaining perfect mental categories. It's about making smart decisions with your total resources to build the life and security you want. Mental accounting is just another psychological quirk you need to recognize and manage, not a boss you need to obey. Chapter 5. Overconfidence and the Illusion of Control. Let me start with a statistic that should humble everyone. Studies show that over 90% of people believe they're above average drivers. Think about that. 90%. Above average. Mathematically impossible, obviously absurd, yet nearly everyone believes it. This isn't stupidity. It's overconfidence bias, and it's one of the most expensive psychological mistakes in finance. Overconfidence is your brain's tendency to overestimate your knowledge, abilities, and control over outcomes. It makes you think you're smarter than you are, more capable than evidence suggests, and more in control than reality permits. In everyday life, overconfidence might just be annoying. In financial life, it's devastating. Consider Alex, a successful entrepreneur who built a thriving business. His success in business made him confident in his abilities. When he started investing, he applied that confidence to the stock market. He assumed that his business acumen would naturally translate to investment success. Alex started picking individual stocks, convinced he could identify winners better than professional fund managers. He traded frequently, sure that his timing was superior. He ignored basic diversification principles Because he was confident in his selections. 5 years later, Alex's portfolio had significantly underperformed a simple index fund. His overconfidence had cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in opportunity cost, not to mention the time he'd wasted researching and trading. The research on this is clear and brutal. Study after study shows that individual investors, especially men, dramatically overestimate their ability to beat the market. They trade too frequently, incur excessive fees, and generally earn returns well below what they would have achieved with passive index funds. The most confident investors, those who trade most frequently, perform the worst. The data is overwhelming. Yet overconfidence persists because it feels good to believe you have special insight, superior judgment, and exceptional ability. Overconfidence manifests in several related biases that compound the damage. First, there's the illusion of control. You believe you have more influence over outcomes than you actually do. Investors study charts, follow news obsessively, and make frequent adjustments, believing all this activity gives them control over their returns. It doesn't. Most of investment returns come from broad market movements and asset allocation decisions, not from clever stock picking or perfect timing. The illusion of control explains why people prefer actively choosing lottery numbers rather than letting the computer generate them randomly, even though the odds are identical. It feels like you have more control when you make the choice, even though you objectively don't. In investing, the illusion of control leads people to spend enormous time and energy on activities that don't actually improve their outcomes. Day traders stare at screens for hours, convinced their attention and activity increase their control over results. Study after study shows day traders, on average, lose money. Second, there's hindsight bias, the tendency to believe after the fact that you knew all along how things would turn out. When a stock you sold crashes, you tell yourself you knew it would happen, even though you sold for entirely different reasons. When an investment you avoided succeeds spectacularly, you convince yourself you saw the flaws that made you stay away. Hindsight bias feeds overconfidence because it makes you remember your past predictions as more accurate than they actually were. You remember the few calls you got right and forget the many you got wrong. This creates a false sense of your predictive ability. Jennifer invested in tech stocks in the late 1990s. When the bubble burst, she lost 60% of her portfolio. Looking back, she told herself and others that she knew it was a bubble, that she saw it coming, that she'd been worried about valuations, but her trading records told a different story. She'd been buying aggressively right up until the crash. She hadn't sold to preserve capital. She'd been as caught up in the excitement as everyone else. Hindsight bias let her rewrite her memory to preserve her self-image as a savvy investor. Third, there's confirmation bias, the tendency to seek and interpret information in ways that confirm your existing beliefs. You pay attention to evidence supporting your views and ignore or dismiss contradicting evidence. If you believe a stock will rise, you notice all the positive news about the company and rationalize away the negative news. If you've decided real estate is a great investment, you remember stories of people getting rich in property and forget the foreclosures and bankruptcies. Confirmation bias plus overconfidence creates a particularly deadly combination. You become increasingly certain of views based on increasingly biased information processing. You feel your confidence growing as your actual knowledge becomes more distorted. The financial services industry profits enormously from overconfidence. They sell active management, stock picking services, and trading platforms to people who believe they can beat the market, even though the data overwhelmingly shows most can't. They encourage trading activity because trading generates fees. They sell complexity because complex strategies make investors feel sophisticated and in control. They promote stories of legendary investors and market timers because people want to believe they can do the same. But the evidence is clear. The more you trade, the worse you do. The more actively you try to beat the market, the more likely you are to underperform. The more confident you are in your abilities, the more expensive your confidence becomes. Ray Dalio, founder of one of the world's largest hedge funds, attributes much of his success to radical doubt in his own views. He constantly challenges his assumptions, seeks contradicting opinions, and builds systems that force him to question his confidence. Warren Buffett talks about his circle of competence. He only invests in businesses he thoroughly understands and stays away from everything else, no matter how promising it looks. He knows the boundaries of his knowledge and respects them. These successful investors have learned to fight overconfidence by building external checks against it. They don't trust their own certainty. They assume they're wrong until proven otherwise. They demand overwhelming evidence before committing. For average investors, the lesson is even simpler. Acknowledge that you probably can't beat the market because almost nobody can consistently, and trying will likely cost you money. This doesn't mean you shouldn't invest. It means you should invest humbly. Diversify broadly. Keep costs low. Think long-term. Accept market returns rather than chasing the illusion of superior returns through superior insight. The irony is that accepting your limitations and investing simply and passively will likely make you wealthier than the overconfident trader who believes they have special abilities. Overconfidence also affects everyday financial decisions beyond investing. People underestimate how long projects will take and how much they'll cost. Renovations always exceed budget and timeline. Business ventures need more capital than projected. Careers develop more slowly than hoped. This planning fallacy causes people to take on financial commitments they can't actually meet because they're overconfident in their ability to execute quickly and efficiently. People overestimate their future income, assuming promotions and raises that may never materialize. They underestimate future expenses, assuming their current spending level will remain stable when it historically increases over time. They believe they'll start budgeting next month, exercise regularly next week, and save diligently next year. The optimism feels good, but leads to financial commitments based on an idealized future self who never quite materializes. Fighting overconfidence requires brutal self-honesty and external accountability. Start by tracking your predictions and seeing how accurate they actually are. When you think a stock will rise, write down your prediction in with specific numbers and timing. Check back later. You'll likely discover your predictions are much worse than you thought. Keep records of your investment decisions and outcomes. Don't rely on memory. Memory is unreliable and biased. Hard data reveals the truth about your actual performance versus your imagined performance. Seek out people who will challenge your views rather than people who will agree with you. Surround yourself with skeptics who force you to justify your confidence. If you can't defend your position against smart critics, maybe your confidence isn't justified. Before making major financial decisions, force yourself to consider why you might be wrong. Actively generate counter-arguments to your own position. List all the ways your plan could fail. Assume your estimates are optimistic and build in buffers. Remember that confidence is not the same as competence. Feeling certain doesn't make you right. The most dangerous place in financial life is being confidently wrong about something important. The path to financial success isn't developing superhuman abilities to predict markets or time investments perfectly. It's accepting your limitations, investing humbly and intelligently, and letting time and compound growth do the heavy lifting. Because in the end, the most expensive words in finance might be, "I'm sure about this." Unless backed by overwhelming evidence and extensive expertise, certainty is usually just overconfidence in disguise. And overconfidence is usually just expensive ignorance you haven't discovered yet. Chapter 6. Hurting Behavior and Social Proof. Humans are social creatures. For most of our evolutionary history, being part of the group meant survival. Being ostracized meant death. Your brain developed powerful instincts to monitor what others are doing and conform to group behavior. This instinct served our ancestors well. If everyone in the tribe suddenly started running, you ran too. You didn't stop to analyze whether the threat was real. You trusted the wisdom of the crowd and survived. But in financial markets, following the crowd often leads straight over a cliff. Herding behavior is the tendency to make decisions based on what others are doing, rather than on independent analysis. When everyone's buying, you buy. When everyone's selling, you sell. When everyone's talking about how much money they're making in cryptocurrency or real estate or technology stocks, you want in. The psychological drive is overwhelming. Nobody wants to be left out. Nobody wants to be the fool who missed the opportunity everyone else caught. Nobody wants to feel stupid when their friends and neighbors are getting rich. So you follow the herd. And usually, by the time the herd arrives, it's too late. Consider the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s. Everyone was talking about internet stocks. Companies with no profits, sometimes with barely any revenue, were worth billions. People quit their jobs to become day traders. Parties featured conversations about which tech stocks people were buying. The psychological pressure to participate was immense. Your neighbor made $100,000 last year trading tech stocks from his bedroom. Your coworker doubled his money in 6 months. Your brother-in-law keeps telling you about the next big internet opportunity. Not participating felt foolish. Missing out felt painful. So people who had no understanding of technology, no experience evaluating businesses, and no rational basis for belief, threw money at anything with .com in its name. Then the bubble burst. Trillions in wealth vanished. People who'd followed the herd into the market at peak prices lost most of their money. But the people who'd warned about overvaluation, who'd stayed out of the herd, protected their wealth. The same pattern repeats in every bubble. Real estate in 2006, cryptocurrencies in late 2017, meme stocks in 2021. The specifics change. The psychological dynamic doesn't. Herding behavior works through several mechanisms. First, there's social proof. When you're uncertain about something, you look to others for guidance. If many people are doing something, your brain assumes they must know something you don't. They can't all be wrong, right? Actually, they can. They can all be following each other for the exact same reason you are. Nobody wanting to miss out, nobody willing to question whether the crowd might be wrong. Second, there's fear of missing out, FOMO, one of the most powerful forces in modern financial psychology. When you see others making money, your brain screams at you to join them. The pain of watching others get rich while you sit on the sidelines becomes unbearable. FOMO drove countless people to buy Bitcoin at $20,000 because they couldn't stand watching it rise from $1,000. They didn't understand it. They didn't have a rational thesis for why it would continue rising. They just couldn't bear missing out anymore. Most lost money. The ones who'd bought at $1,000 before the herd arrived, they made money. The herd, by definition, arrives late. Third, there's the assumption that group behavior reflects collective intelligence. In some domains, crowds are wise. The average estimate of a crowd often beats individual expert estimates for certain types of questions. But financial markets are different. In markets, the crowd's behavior affects the outcome. When everyone believes a stock will rise and buys it, the stock rises, which confirms their belief, which causes more buying. This self-reinforcing cycle can drive prices far beyond rational values. Then, when the trend reverses, the same dynamic works in reverse. Everyone selling drives prices down, which triggers more selling, which drives prices down further. The herd stampedes in both directions, creating bubbles and crashes. Consider the housing bubble of the mid-2000s. Housing prices had been rising for years. Everyone believed they would keep rising forever. Why? Because they always had. Because your neighbors were getting rich, buying and selling houses. Because real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and financial advisors all said it was a sure thing. The herd bought houses they couldn't afford with mortgages they didn't understand because everyone else was doing it and everyone else was making money. Until suddenly, they weren't. The herd reversed. Housing prices crashed. Millions lost homes. Trillions in wealth evaporated. The people who'd resisted the herd, who'd questioned whether home prices could really keep rising faster than incomes forever, who'd thought the lending standards seemed insanely loose, they protected themselves. Herding behavior combines with other biases to become especially dangerous. It pairs with overconfidence, making you believe you're smart to follow the crowd. It connects with confirmation bias, making you notice all the evidence that the trend will continue and ignore warning signs. It feeds loss aversion, because once you're in with the herd, getting out means admitting you were wrong and taking a loss. So you stay, hoping the trend will resume, right up until catastrophic loss forces you out. The challenge is that herding behavior doesn't feel irrational when you're doing it. It feels sensible. Smart people you respect are participating. The trend has momentum. The story makes sense. Expert after expert supports it. Only in retrospect does it become obvious that it was a bubble, that valuations were insane, that the story was too good to be true. But by then, the damage is done. The key to avoiding herd behavior is developing independent thinking and the courage to stand apart from the crowd. This is psychologically difficult because it means being willing to look foolish, to miss out on gains others are making, to question what everyone else seems to know. Warren Buffett famously said to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. This is explicit anti-herding advice. Do the opposite of the crowd. When everyone's buying in euphoria, that's the time to be cautious. When everyone's selling in panic, that's the time to look for opportunities. But implementing this is psychologically brutal. Being greedy when others are fearful means buying when your friends think you're crazy, when news is uniformly terrible, when every instinct screams danger. Being fearful when others are greedy means selling. When you could be making more money, when everyone thinks you're leaving money on the table. The best defense against herding is having a clear investment framework and sticking to it regardless of what others are doing. Know what you're willing to pay for assets based on fundamentals, not based on what others are paying. If a stock is worth $50 based on your analysis, you don't pay $100 just because the herd is driving the price up. If a stock is worth $50 and it's trading at $20, because the herd is panicking, you buy it. This requires developing conviction in your own analysis and judgment. It requires tuning out noise from the crowd. It requires being comfortable, being wrong for long periods while the herd drives prices in irrational directions. It also helps to remember that by the time you hear about an opportunity from multiple sources, by the time it's being discussed at parties and in mainstream media, by the time your family members and coworkers are talking about it, the opportunity is probably already over. The real opportunities are discovered before the herd arrives. By the time the herd shows up, early investors are preparing to sell to the newcomers. Think about every financial bubble you've seen. When did you hear about it? Probably well after it was already inflated. The people who made money got in before you'd even heard of it. By the time you were tempted to join, you were joining the herd that would be left holding the bag. Another useful practice is actively seeking contrarian viewpoints. When everyone's bullish, deliberately read bearish analysis. When everyone's panicking, seek out rational voices explaining why the panic might be overdone. This doesn't mean contrarians are always right. It means exposing yourself to different perspectives helps you avoid being swept along by groupthink. Remember that investing is not a social activity. You're not trying to fit in with a group. You're not trying to match what your friends are doing. You're trying to build wealth by making rational decisions based on sound analysis, regardless of what anyone else thinks. The people who build substantial wealth are usually the ones willing to look foolish to the herd. They buy when others are fearful. They sell when others are greedy. They ignore trends and stick to principles. They think independently, even when it's psychologically uncomfortable, because in the end, following the herd might make you feel included, but it rarely makes you wealthy. The herd arrives late to opportunities and leaves late from crashes. If you want better outcomes, you need better thinking, which usually means different thinking from the crowd. Chapter 7: Present Bias and the Struggle for Delayed Gratification. Let me tell you about one of the most famous experiments in psychology. In the 1970s, researcher Walter Mischel offered young children a simple choice: eat 1 marshmallow now, or wait 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. Some children immediately ate the marshmallow. Others tried to wait but gave in. A few managed to resist temptation for the full 15 minutes and earned the second marshmallow. The researchers followed these children for decades. The children who'd been able to delay gratification performed better across almost every measure of life success: higher test scores, better relationships, healthier lifestyles, greater financial stability. The ability to resist immediate temptation for larger future rewards predicted life outcomes better than almost any other single factor. This is the power and challenge of present bias. Your brain's overwhelming preference for immediate rewards over delayed ones, even when the delayed rewards are objectively better. Present bias, also called hyperbolic discounting, is why you struggle to save for retirement when you could spend money on something enjoyable today. Why you can't resist the dessert even though you're trying to lose weight. Why you binge watch shows when you should be working on your career goals. Your brain doesn't value the future rationally. It heavily discounts anything that's not immediate. $100 today feels much more valuable than $110 next month, even though next month is a 10% return in 30 days, which annualizes to over 3,000%. But offer someone $100 in 12 months or $110 in 13 months, and most people choose to wait the extra month for the extra money. The preference changes when both options are in the future. This inconsistency reveals how present bias works. Your brain creates a sharp dividing line between now and later. Anything on the now side gets enormous weight. Anything on the later side gets heavily discounted. The further in the future something is, the less it matters to your present self. This creates devastating financial patterns. You know you should save for retirement. Intellectually, you understand that compound interest over decades will create substantial wealth. But retirement is 30 years away. That money could buy something nice today. Your brain screams for the immediate pleasure and whispers about distant security. So you don't save enough. You underfund retirement accounts. You tell yourself you'll start saving more next year, when you earn a bit more, when life is a bit more settled. But next year, the same dynamic repeats. The future is still distant. The present is still immediate. The bias wins again. Consider Maria, earning $60,000 per year at age 30. Financial advisors tell her that saving just 10% of her income, $6,000 per year, starting now, would grow to over $1 million by retirement through compound returns. But $6,000 per year feels enormous. It's $500 per month she could spend on things she wants now: nicer apartment, better car, more frequent vacations, immediate pleasures. Retirement is 35 years away. That's not real to her. It's abstract, distant, easy to sacrifice for present enjoyment. So Maria saves minimally, a few $100s per month at most. She promises herself she'll increase it when she earns more. Fast forward to age 50. Maria earns $100,000 now, but she has virtually nothing saved for retirement, which is now only 15 years away. Suddenly, retirement is real, close, terrifying. To catch up, she'd need to save over $30,000 per year. But she's built a lifestyle around spending most of her income. Cutting back 30% feels impossible. She's trapped by 20 years of present bias winning over future planning. If she'd started at 30, the pain would have been minor. $6,000 she never got used to spending. By waiting, she transformed a manageable sacrifice into an impossible one. This is present bias in action. Future Maria would desperately wish present Maria had sacrificed small pleasures for future security. But present Maria couldn't feel the urgency that future Maria would experience. So, present Maria chose the marshmallow. Present bias affects more than just savings. It influences every decision involving present costs for future benefits or present benefits with future costs. You know you should exercise, but it's uncomfortable now, and the health benefits are months or years away. Present bias chooses the couch. You know you should learn new skills to advance your career, but it requires effort now, and the payoff is uncertain and delayed. Present bias chooses entertainment. You know you should eat healthier, but the diet is restrictive now, and the health improvements are gradual and distant. Present bias chooses the burger and fries. The reverse is also true. Present bias makes you underestimate future costs. Credit card debt seems manageable because the purchases are enjoyable now and the interest charges are in the future. The new car is exciting today, even though the monthly payments will strain your budget for 5 years. Present bias creates a fundamental conflict between your present self and your future self. Your present self wants pleasure, comfort, and enjoyment now. Your future self desperately wishes your present self would make better choices. But your future self has no voice in current decisions. Only your present self decides. And your present self is biased toward the present. The financial industry understands present bias perfectly and exploits it ruthlessly. They make spending easy and immediate. One-click purchases, credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes. They make saving hard and delayed. Complicated forms, distant payoffs, abstract benefits. They advertise products emphasizing immediate pleasure while hiding future costs. You can have this amazing thing right now and worry about payments later. Your present bias says yes before your rational mind can object. Fighting present bias requires strategies that help future you have a voice in current decisions. The most powerful is automation. Make the good decision once, then automate it so you don't have to keep choosing it. Set up automatic transfers from checking to savings on payday. You never see the money, so you don't miss it. The decision is made once, and then it happens without requiring ongoing willpower. Automatically increase retirement contributions by 1 or 2% per year. You barely notice each increase, but over time, they add up to substantial savings without the pain of one large cut to your current spending. Another strategy is making future consequences more vivid and immediate. Studies show that when people see aged versions of their own faces in virtual reality, they save more for retirement. Seeing their future self makes the future feel more real and immediate. Create visual reminders of your goals. If you're saving for a house, put a picture of your dream home where you'll see it when tempted to make impulse purchases. If you're saving for financial independence, calculate and display how much closer each saved dollar brings you to your goal. Reframe choices to highlight opportunity costs. That $200 purchase isn't just $200, it's the $5,000 that $200 could become over 20 years if invested. Suddenly, the immediate purchase seems more expensive. Set up commitment devices that help you stick to long-term plans. Tell friends about your goals, creating social pressure to follow through. Make bets with accountability partners. Use apps that donate your money to causes you hate if you don't meet savings targets. The key is recognizing that willpower alone won't overcome present bias. Willpower is a limited resource that depletes throughout the day. You can't rely on it to make the right choice every time temptation appears. Instead, structure your environment and automate your decisions to make the good choice, the easy choice, the default choice, the choice that happens without requiring willpower. Make spending harder. Remove credit cards from online accounts. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Avoid stores where you tend to impulse buy. Make saving easier. Automate it. Make it the default. Require effort to reduce it. Also recognize that small sacrifices now become easier as you adapt. The first month of saving an extra $500 per month feels painful, but you adjust your spending, find cheaper alternatives, and 3 months later, you don't miss the money. Future you will thank present you for every sacrifice made today. But present you can't hear future you's gratitude, can only feel present desire for immediate pleasure. The solution is remembering that you won't be present you forever. You'll become future you eventually, and future you's life will be determined by the choices present you makes today. Every dollar saved now is a dollar of freedom later. Every dollar spent on impulse today is a dollar of freedom sacrificed tomorrow. Present bias blinds you to this trade-off, making today's small pleasure seem worth tomorrow's larger sacrifice. But it isn't. Almost never. The data is overwhelming. People regret not saving more. They regret impulse purchases that seemed important at the time but were forgotten weeks later. They regret choosing immediate pleasure over long-term security. The way to build wealth isn't developing superhuman discipline to resist every temptation. It's acknowledging that present bias will win most direct confrontations and engineering your financial life so you don't have to fight that battle constantly. Automate good decisions. Make bad decisions harder. Visualize your future self. Remember that the present feeling of desire passes quickly, but the consequences of choices persist for years. Because in the end, financial success is largely about making present you behave in ways that benefit future you, even though present you doesn't want to. It's about overcoming the tyranny of the immediate and remembering that the future arrives eventually, and when it does, you'll be living with the consequences of every choice you're making right now. Chapter 8: Framing Effects and the Power of Perception. Let me present you with two choices. First scenario: you're guaranteed to save 200 lives. Second scenario: there's a 1/3 chance you'll save 600 lives and a 2/3 chance you'll save nobody. Which would you choose? Most people choose the first option. The certainty of saving 200 people feels better than gambling on potentially saving more. Now consider these two options. First scenario: 400 people will definitely die. Second scenario: there's a 1/3 chance nobody dies and a 2/3 chance 600 people die. Which would you choose? Most people choose the second option. The possibility of saving everyone feels worth the risk. Here's the catch. These are mathematically identical choices, just framed differently. The first scenario emphasizes lives saved. The second emphasizes lives lost. Same situations, different framings, completely different choices. Welcome to the power of framing effects. Framing is how information is presented, and it dramatically affects how you perceive options and make decisions. The exact same facts, presented in different frames, can lead to opposite choices. This happens constantly in financial decisions, usually without you noticing. Consider a credit card that offers 2% cash back. Sounds great, right? You're earning money on every purchase. But what if I told you that merchants pay approximately 3% in fees to accept credit cards, and they price this into all their products? Suddenly, you're not earning 2%. You're getting a 2% discount on the 3% markup everyone pays to subsidize credit card rewards. Same economics, different frame, different emotional response. Or consider this. A financial advisor tells you their recommended investment has returned an average of 8% annually over the past decade. Impressive. But what if they framed it differently? The investment had 5 years of gains and 5 years of losses, with dramatic volatility throughout. Same performance, different frame, different appeal. Framing affects how you perceive risk. Telling you an investment has a 90% success rate sounds appealing. Telling you it has a 10% failure rate sounds risky. Same information, different emotional impact. Products are always framed to emphasize benefits and hide costs. Only $99 per month, instead of nearly $1,200 per year. 0% financing, instead of the markup built into the base price to cover the financing cost. Framing affects how you perceive discounts. A $50 item marked down from $100 feels like a bargain. The same item regularly priced at $50 doesn't create the same excitement. You're paying the same amount, but the frame of a discount versus regular price creates different value perceptions. The anchoring effect is a type of framing. Whatever number you see first anchors your perception of value. If you see a house listed at $500,000, then see it reduced to $400,000, you think you're getting a deal. But if you'd seen it at $400,000 initially, that would become your reference point, and you'd think about whether it was worth that price, not about the savings from a higher price you never would have paid. Retail stores use this constantly. Mark items up, then put them on sale. Show original high prices crossed out next to sale prices. Create the frame of savings even when the sale price is the actual normal price. Framing affects how you think about losses versus gains. Would you drive 20 minutes across town to save $10 on a $50 item? Most people say yes. That's a 20% savings. Would you drive 20 minutes across town to save $10 on a $5,000 item? Most people say no. It's only 0.2%. Not worth the effort. But you're saving the same $10. The frame of percentage versus absolute amount changes the decision, even though the value of your time and the actual savings are identical in both cases. Understanding framing helps you see through manipulation and make better decisions based on substance rather than presentation. First, always reframe financial information multiple ways to see how it changes your perception. If something is presented as a monthly cost, calculate the annual or lifetime cost. If it's framed as a percentage, calculate the absolute amount. If it's framed as potential gains, consider potential losses. Second, beware of default framings designed to influence your decision. Assume that whenever someone presents information, they've chosen a frame that makes their position look most appealing. Ask yourself how else the information could be framed and whether that changes your view. Third, create neutral frames for decisions. Instead of asking, should I buy this investment that averages 8% returns? Ask, given all the information, including volatility, fees, and tax implications, is this the best use of my money? Fourth, be especially suspicious of frames that create urgency or scarcity. Limited time offer is a frame designed to make you decide quickly based on fear of missing out rather than carefully based on value. Only 3 left in stock creates artificial scarcity to override rational evaluation. Fifth, recognize that your own mind creates frames that influence your decisions. You might frame saving money as deprivation, making it psychologically painful, or you could frame it as buying future freedom, making it psychologically rewarding. Same activity, different frame, different experience. You might frame debt as normal and acceptable, making you comfortable with it. Or you could frame debt as selling your future income for present spending, making you uncomfortable with it. The frame you choose affects your behavior. People who successfully build wealth often reframe financial choices in ways that support good behavior. They don't see saving as sacrifice. They see spending on depreciating assets as the sacrifice. They don't see investing as risky. They see not investing as the risk of inflation eroding their wealth. These frames aren't more correct than the alternatives. They're strategic choices about how to think about money that make good financial behavior easier. The key is recognizing that there's no objective frame. Every presentation of information emphasizes some aspects and de-emphasizes others. Every way of thinking about a choice highlights some considerations and minimizes others. Once you understand this, you can choose frames strategically instead of accepting the frames presented to you. Want to save more? Frame spending as stealing from your future self. Frame saving as paying yourself first. Frame the invested money as buying freedom and security. Want to reduce debt? Don't frame minimum payments as acceptable. Frame them as choosing to pay as much interest as possible. Frame extra payments as buying back your future income. Want to invest for the long term? Don't frame short-term volatility as losses. Frame it as noise. Frame market downturns as opportunities to buy assets on sale. Frame time in the market as the real source of returns. These frames aren't manipulation. They're choosing to think about reality in ways that align with your actual goals rather than ways that trigger unhelpful emotional responses. The financial industry uses framing to sell you things you don't need at prices you shouldn't pay. Understanding framing lets you resist this manipulation and see through to the substance beneath the presentation. It also helps you communicate about money more effectively. If you're trying to convince yourself or others to make better financial choices, framing matters enormously. You should save 10% of your income. Frame saving as an obligation, creating resistance. Would you like to keep 10% of everything you earn for yourself before spending on others? Frame saving as keeping what's yours, creating appeal. Same suggestion. Different frame, different response. Framing doesn't change reality. It changes how you perceive reality. And since your decisions are based on your perceptions, framing changes your decisions. The people who make the best financial decisions aren't necessarily the ones with the most information. They're the ones who frame information in ways that lead to wise choices rather than ways that lead to foolish ones. They've learned to see past manipulative framings. They've learned to reframe information to reveal truth rather than obscure it. They've learned to choose strategic frames that support their goals rather than accepting default frames that undermine them. Because in the end, you can't escape framing. Every thought about money happens within some frame. The question is whether you're consciously choosing your frames or unconsciously accepting frames chosen by others to serve their interests, not yours. Chapter 9. Emotional Spending and the Retail Therapy Trap. You've had a terrible day. Your boss criticized your work unfairly. Traffic was a nightmare. You got in an argument with someone you love. You're stressed, frustrated, and upset. So you go shopping. Not because you need anything, because buying something makes you feel better. For a little while. Welcome to emotional spending, one of the most common and destructive financial behaviors. Emotional spending is using purchases to manage your emotional state. You're not buying because you need or even want the item. You're buying because the act of buying temporarily relieves negative emotions or enhances positive ones. The psychology is straightforward. Making a purchase triggers a dopamine release in your brain, the same reward chemical involved in drug addiction, gambling, and other compulsive behaviors. For a brief moment, you feel good. The stress or sadness or anxiety diminishes, but the relief is temporary. The underlying emotions return, and now you have additional stress, the financial consequences of unnecessary spending, the clutter of things you don't need, the guilt of impulse purchases you regret. So, you need another purchase to feel better about the last one. The cycle continues. Research shows that emotional spending happens in response to both negative and positive emotions. Stress, sadness, anxiety, and loneliness trigger spending to feel better. But so do happiness, excitement, and celebration. You're sad, so you buy to cheer up. You're happy, so you buy to celebrate. The common thread isn't the emotion. It's using spending as an emotional management tool. Consider Jessica, who had a stressful job in finance. Multiple times per week, she'd come home feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Her solution? Online shopping. Clothes she didn't need, gadgets she'd never use, home decor that would sit in boxes. Each purchase provided a brief high, something new, something to look forward to receiving, a distraction from stress. But the packages would arrive, often unopened for weeks. The credit card bill would come, adding financial stress to her work stress. She'd promise herself to stop, but the next stressful day, the cycle would repeat. Over 2 years, Jessica spent over $30,000 on emotional spending. Most items still had tags on. Her closets overflowed. Her credit cards carried balances, and she was no less stressed than before. The spending didn't solve the underlying problem. It just added financial problems to the emotional ones. Emotional spending exploits several psychological vulnerabilities. First, humans are terrible at predicting what will make them happy. You imagine that buying something will provide lasting satisfaction, but research shows the pleasure from purchases fades quickly. Second, the pain of paying is separated from the pleasure of purchasing when you use credit. You get the dopamine hit immediately, but the financial pain comes later, too delayed to override the impulse. Third, modern shopping is engineered to maximize emotional triggers. One-click purchasing, personalized recommendations, scarcity messaging, influencer marketing. Every element is designed to convert emotional impulses into purchases before rational thought can intervene. Fourth, shopping provides distraction and control. When life feels chaotic or overwhelming, making purchase decisions gives you something you can control. When you're bored or lonely, shopping provides stimulation and activity. The antidote to emotional spending is recognizing it for what it is, a maladaptive coping mechanism that creates more problems than it solves. Start by tracking your emotional state when you make purchases. Notice what you're feeling. Are you stressed, bored, anxious, excited, trying to avoid dealing with something difficult? This awareness creates a pause between feeling and action. You can't stop the emotional trigger, but you can choose not to respond with spending. Next, develop alternative emotional management strategies. Feeling stressed? Exercise, meditate, talk to a friend, work on a hobby. Feeling bored? Read, learn something new, engage in a creative activity. Feeling sad? Process the emotion. Don't suppress it with shopping. These alternatives might not provide the same immediate dopamine hit as purchasing, but they don't create financial damage, and they're more effective at actually improving your emotional state long term. Also, implement friction in the spending process. Remove saved credit card information from websites. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Avoid browsing shopping sites when you're emotional. Make yourself wait 24 hours before any non-essential purchase over a certain amount. This friction gives your rational mind time to catch up with your emotional impulse. Often, when you return after the waiting period, you've realized you don't actually want the item. Understand that retailers and marketers have spent billions studying how to trigger emotional spending. They know exactly which psychological buttons to push. Social media influencers are paid to make products seem essential to happiness or success. Every limited time offer is designed to create urgency that overrides rational evaluation. Every "you deserve this" message targets your emotional need for reward or comfort. Every personalized recommendation algorithm is optimized to find products you'll impulse buy. Being aware of this manipulation helps you resist it. When you feel the urge to buy, ask yourself, am I responding to a genuine need or to engineered emotional triggers? Another powerful strategy is creating meaningful financial goals that compete with emotional spending. Saving for a house down payment, building an emergency fund, planning an important trip, working toward financial independence. When you have compelling reasons to save money, emotional spending has to fight against those goals. Before buying, you can ask, would I rather have this item or be that much closer to my important goal? Also recognize that some emotional spending might be indicating deeper issues. If you're constantly stressed, maybe you need to change jobs or develop better stress management skills. If you're frequently lonely, maybe you need to invest in relationships. If you're perpetually bored, maybe you need more engaging life activities. Addressing root causes reduces the emotional states that trigger spending. For some people, emotional spending crosses into addiction territory. If you can't control it despite recognizing the harm, if it's causing serious financial damage, if you hide it from loved ones or lie about it, consider seeking professional help. Shopping addiction is real and can be as destructive as other addictions. The goal isn't eliminating all emotional connection to purchases. Humans naturally enjoy acquiring new things. Reasonable spending on things you truly value and will use is fine. The problem is using spending as your primary emotional regulation tool. Buying things you don't value to manage feelings you should address directly. Financial success requires learning to separate emotions from spending decisions. Make purchases based on value, utility, and careful consideration, not based on managing your current emotional state. Because every dollar you spend emotionally is a dollar you can't spend intentionally. Every purchase made to feel better temporarily is a purchase you'll likely regret later. Every item bought on impulse is space taken up by clutter instead of what you actually value. The people who build wealth have learned to feel their emotions without spending money on them. They've developed healthier coping mechanisms. They've created enough friction in the purchasing process to prevent impulse spending. They've built meaningful financial goals that make emotional spending less appealing. They still experience the same emotional triggers everyone does. They just respond differently. They feel stressed without shopping. They feel bored without browsing. They feel sad without buying things to cheer up. And as a result, their finances reflect intentional choices rather than emotional reactions. Their money goes toward things they genuinely value rather than disappearing into a black hole of retail therapy. Because in the end, you can't buy happiness, peace, or fulfillment. You can only waste money trying. The emotions you're trying to fix with shopping need real solutions, not temporary dopamine hits. And your financial future deserves better than being sacrificed on the altar of emotional impulse. Chapter 10. Building your psychological wealth defense system. We've explored the psychological forces sabotaging your financial decisions: loss aversion, sunk costs, mental accounting, overconfidence, hurting behavior, present bias, framing effects, emotional spending. The question now is, what do you do with this knowledge? Understanding your psychological weaknesses is valuable, but only if it changes your behavior. Knowledge without implementation is just interesting trivia. So let's build a complete system to protect your wealth from your own psychology. First principle: you cannot rely on willpower alone. Your psychology will win most direct confrontations. The biases we've discussed are hardwired, not bugs you can simply decide to fix. They've been shaped by millions of years of evolution and aren't going away because you've read about them. Instead of fighting your psychology, you need to work with it. Design systems that make good financial behavior automatic and bad financial behavior difficult. Start with automation. Every good financial decision you can automate is one you don't have to make repeatedly using limited willpower. Automate savings. Money moves from checking to savings or investment accounts on payday, before you see it and before you can spend it. Start with whatever percentage you can manage, even if it's small, then increase it gradually. Automate bill payments. No late fees, no decisions about whether you can skip a payment this month, no mental energy spent remembering due dates. Automate retirement contributions. Money goes to retirement accounts before you can redirect it to consumption. Many plans allow automatic annual increases, raising your contribution rate by 1% per year without requiring new decisions. These automations protect you from present bias by making the good choice the default choice. They protect you from emotional spending by removing money before emotions can divert it. They protect you from decision fatigue by making decisions once, then executing them forever. Second principle: make bad financial decisions harder. Add friction to behaviors you want to reduce. Remove saved credit card information from online shopping sites. Having to enter the number manually creates enough delay for rational thought to potentially override impulse. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. You can't be tempted by offers you don't see. Delete shopping apps from your phone. Browsing requires more effort, providing more opportunities to reconsider. Leave credit cards at home for routine errands. Use cash for discretionary spending. The physical pain of handing over bills makes spending more conscious. Institute waiting periods for any purchase over a certain amount. Make yourself wait 24 hours for anything over $50, 48 hours for anything over $200, a week for anything over $1,000. These friction points protect you from impulse spending driven by emotional states or clever marketing. They don't prevent all unwise purchases, but they significantly reduce them. Third principle: create external accountability. Your internal dialogue can rationalize anything. External accountability makes rationalization harder. Share your financial goals with someone who will hold you accountable, not someone who will judge you, but someone who cares about your success and will ask hard questions. Track your spending and review it regularly, either with yourself or with an accountability partner. Knowing you'll have to explain your purchases creates powerful motivation to make defensible choices. Join a financial accountability group where people support each other in making better money decisions. The social pressure and support can override the psychological impulses that derail individual efforts. Consider working with a financial advisor who understands behavioral finance. A good advisor doesn't just provide investment advice. They help you stay committed to sound strategies when emotions scream to do something else. Fourth principle: optimize your environment for good financial behavior. Your environment shapes your behavior more than you realize. Don't keep credit cards visible. Out of sight reduces temptation. Arrange your accounts so checking account balances show only money available for discretionary spending, with bills and savings already allocated to other accounts. This prevents the mental accounting error of spending money that's technically in checking but should go to other purposes. Create visual reminders of your financial goals. Pictures of the house you're saving for. Charts showing progress toward financial independence. Anything that makes distant goals feel more immediate and real. Avoid environments that trigger spending. If malls make you buy things you don't need, don't go to malls for entertainment. If certain websites lead to impulse purchases, block them. Surround yourself with people who have healthy financial attitudes. Social norms are powerful. If everyone around you spends recklessly, that becomes normal to you. If everyone around you saves diligently and invests wisely, that becomes normal. Fifth principle: build financial literacy through education. Many poor financial decisions stem from simply not understanding how money works. Learn about compound interest. Truly understanding how money grows exponentially over time makes present sacrifice for future wealth more psychologically tolerable. Learn about typical investment returns over time. Understanding that markets go up and down, but trend upward over decades, makes you less likely to panic sell during downturns. Learn about the actual costs of debt. When you understand that credit card debt at 18% interest means you're paying nearly 1/5 of your balance in interest each year, maintaining that debt becomes psychologically harder. Learn about common financial scams and too good to be true schemes. Knowledge protects you from falling for them. But remember, financial literacy alone isn't enough. Smart people make dumb money decisions not because they lack information, but because psychology overrides knowledge. Combine education with the behavioral systems we've discussed. Sixth principle: develop self-awareness around your specific psychological vulnerabilities. Everyone has different weak points. Are you particularly susceptible to loss aversion? Losing investments too long? Create rules that force you to cut losses at predetermined points. Do you tend toward overconfidence, trading too frequently, or taking excessive risks? Automate investing through index funds and set rules that limit your ability to make major changes without a waiting period. Are you prone to emotional spending when stressed? Identify your stress triggers and develop non-spending coping mechanisms you'll actually use. Do you follow herds into bubbles? Force yourself to wait until an investment opportunity has existed for at least a year before considering it, by which time the herd has usually moved on. Customize your defense system to your particular weaknesses rather than trying to guard against every possible bias equally. Seventh principle: measure and track your progress. What gets measured gets managed. Track your net worth monthly. Seeing it grow reinforces good behaviors. Seeing it shrink forces acknowledgement of problems. Track your savings rate. This matters more than absolute amounts when building wealth. Track your spending by category. This reveals where money actually goes versus where you think it goes. Track your investment performance against simple benchmarks. If you're actively trading, compare your results to a simple index fund. If you're underperforming, that's data suggesting your activity is destroying value. Review these metrics regularly and adjust your behaviors based on what the data reveals. Eighth principle: plan for failure and include recovery mechanisms. You will make mistakes. You will have moments of weakness. Your psychological defenses will sometimes fail. The question isn't whether you'll mess up, but how you'll respond when you do. Don't let one financial mistake derail everything. If you make an emotional purchase, don't conclude that you failed and might as well keep spending. Treat it as a single error to learn from, then immediately return to your system. Build in flexibility for occasional indulgences. A system that allows zero pleasure from spending is unsustainable. Budget for reasonable discretionary spending so you don't feel perpetually deprived. Create emergency protocols for major life events that typically trigger financial mistakes: job loss, health crisis, divorce, inheritance. Decide in advance how you'll handle these situations before emotions are running high. Have a trusted person you can contact before making any major financial decision in an emotional state. Give them permission to talk you out of it if they think you're making a mistake. Ninth principle: remember that wealth is not the goal. Financial security is a tool to enable the life you want, not an end in itself. Understanding financial psychology shouldn't make you neurotic about money. It should free you from unconscious patterns that were preventing you from building the wealth you need for the life you want. Use the systems we've discussed to serve your values and goals, not to optimize for maximum wealth at the expense of everything else. If spending money on experiences with family creates genuine long-term value in your life, that's wise spending, not a psychological weakness to overcome. If giving generously to causes you care about brings deep fulfillment, that's a rational choice, not emotional spending. The point is making conscious, intentional decisions aligned with your values rather than unconscious, reactive decisions driven by psychological impulses. 10th principle: start now. Start small. Build gradually. Don't try to implement everything at once. Pick one area where your psychology is most undermining your finances and start there. Maybe it's automating savings. Maybe it's adding friction to online shopping. Maybe it's implementing a waiting period for purchases. Whatever change would have the biggest impact, start there. Get that one habit established. Then add another. Then another. Build your psychological defense system gradually, one habit at a time, until good financial behavior becomes automatic. The goal is progress, not perfection. Every step toward better financial behavior compounds over time, just like investment returns. Conclusion: The Intelligent Person's Guide to Outsmarting Themselves. We've covered a lot of ground together. We've explored the hidden psychological forces that make intelligent people make poor financial decisions. We've examined how your brain's ancient wiring collides with modern financial complexity. We've discovered that financial success isn't about being smarter, but about being wiser about how your mind works with money. Now, let's bring it all together. The central insight of financial psychology is that you are not a purely rational actor. You can't think your way to good financial decisions through willpower and intelligence alone. Your brain has built-in biases, emotional responses, and decision-making shortcuts that consistently lead you astray when money is involved. But here's the empowering truth. Once you understand these psychological patterns, you can design systems to protect yourself from yourself. You can outsmart your own mind by working with your psychology rather than fighting it. You now understand that loss aversion makes you hold losing investments too long and sell winners too early. You know to set predetermined rules for cutting losses and letting winners run, removing emotion from the decision. You understand that sunk costs trap you into throwing good money after bad. You know to evaluate decisions based on future potential, ignoring what you've already invested. You understand that mental accounting creates artificial categories that prevent optimal financial decisions. You know to look at your total financial picture and move money between categories when it improves your overall position. You understand that overconfidence makes you trade too much and take excessive risks. You know to invest humbly, broadly, and with low costs, accepting market returns rather than chasing superior returns through superior insight you probably don't have. You understand that herding behavior drives you into bubbles and out during crashes. You know to think independently, be skeptical when everyone agrees, and consider contrarian viewpoints. You understand that present bias makes you prioritize immediate pleasure over future security. You know to automate good decisions, make future goals vivid, and structure your environment to make wise choices the easy choices. You understand that framing shapes your perception of identical options. You know to reframe information multiple ways and choose strategic frames that support your goals. You understand that emotional spending uses purchases to manage emotional states. You know to develop healthier coping mechanisms and add friction to prevent impulse purchases. This knowledge transforms your relationship with money. You stop being a victim of invisible forces and start being an active architect of your financial life. But remember, knowledge alone changes nothing. Only implementation matters. Only behavior change creates different outcomes. So, here's your action plan. First, within the next week, implement one automation that protects your finances from your psychology. Set up automatic transfers to savings. Automate bill payments. Increase retirement contributions automatically. Second, within the next month, add one friction point that makes bad financial behavior harder. Remove saved credit cards from shopping sites. Institute waiting periods for purchases. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Third, within the next 3 months, develop one healthy alternative to emotional spending. Find a hobby that engages you. Build better stress management habits. Deepen your relationships. Create meaning that doesn't require purchases. Fourth, within the next 6 months, build financial literacy that makes psychology easier to overcome. Learn about compound interest. Understand typical market returns. Study common financial mistakes. Fifth, within the next year, create a complete psychological defense system that protects your wealth from your own mind. Automate the good. Add friction to the bad. Build accountability. Optimize your environment. Develop self-awareness. Then maintain these systems for the rest of your life. Review them regularly. Adjust them as circumstances change. Keep learning about your psychological patterns and adapting your defenses. Do this, and you will build wealth. Not because you've become smarter, but because you've become wiser about how your mind works with money. You'll still feel the pull of loss aversion, but you won't let it control your investment decisions. You'll still experience sunk cost pressures, but you won't let them trap you in deteriorating situations. You'll still notice hurting behavior, but you won't follow the crowd off cliffs. You'll still be human, with all the psychological quirks that entails, but you'll have systems that protect you from your own human nature when it comes to money. And here's what's beautiful about this approach. It gets easier over time. The habits become automatic. The systems become invisible infrastructure. The good decisions compound while you barely think about them. 20 years from now, you could look back and see that the simple systems you put in place today created hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in wealth, not because you worked harder or earned more, but because you stopped sabotaging yourself financially. You protected your money from the most dangerous threat it faces, your own psychology. That's the promise of financial psychology. Not that you'll become perfectly rational, but that you'll become effectively rational, with systems that produce rational outcomes even when your emotions are screaming for something else. Not that you'll never make financial mistakes, but that you'll make fewer mistakes, catch them faster, and recover from them more effectively. Not that money will suddenly become easy, but that the psychological obstacles that were invisible will become visible, and once visible, they can be managed. The smart people making dumb money decisions we discussed at the beginning, they're not doomed to financial struggle. They just need to stop trying to solve financial problems with intelligence alone and start applying intelligence to understanding and managing their own psychology. That's what you now know how to do. You understand the invisible forces. You have strategies to counteract them. You have a framework for building psychological wealth defenses. The only question is, will you implement it? Will you actually set up the automations, add the frictions, build the accountability, and create the systems? Or will you nod along, agree that it all makes sense, then continue making the same psychological mistakes you've always made? That choice is yours. The information can't make the choice for you. Only you can decide whether you'll take action or just accumulate knowledge you never use. I hope you choose action. I hope you start building your psychological defense system today, not next month, not when things are less busy, but right now, with one small step. Because every day you wait is a day your psychology continues undermining your financial future without opposition. Every week you delay is a week of compound returns you're not capturing. Every month you procrastinate is a month of poor decisions adding up. But every day you implement these principles is a day your wealth is protected and growing. Every week you maintain these systems is a week of good decisions compounding. Every month you stick with it is a month closer to the financial security you deserve. The war between your rational mind and your psychological impulses never ends. But you can win most of the battles by choosing the battlefield wisely, by engineering situations where your rational mind has the advantage, by not relying on willpower when systems can do the work. You're smart enough to understand the psychology. Now be wise enough to protect yourself from it. Your future self is counting on you. Don't let them down. Now go automate something. Add some friction somewhere. Make one good decision harder to avoid and one bad decision harder to make. Start building the psychological wealth defenses that will protect your financial future for decades to come. Because understanding why smart people make dumb money decisions is valuable. But becoming a smart person who makes smart money decisions, that's life-changing. Thank you for taking this journey through financial psychology with me. I hope it serves you well for many years to come. If this audiobook has opened your eyes to the psychological forces shaping your financial life, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment sharing which bias you struggle with most or which strategy you're going to implement first. If you found value in these insights, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content on personal growth, financial wisdom, and life transformation. Share this with someone you care about who might be making financial decisions based on psychology rather than wisdom. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them why they're sabotaging themselves so they can stop. Remember, financial success isn't about being smarter. It's about being wiser. And wisdom starts with understanding yourself. Until next time, may your decisions be rational, your systems be strong, and your wealth be protected from your own psychology.